Welcome to Diary of a Dreamer, where resilience unlocks your potential. I'm Tasha Eizinger, and each week I'll bring you powerful stories and practical insights from my own experiences and inspiring guests. Whether you're facing challenges or chasing dreams, this podcast is your go-to for motivation, building confidence, and practical tips for transforming obstacles into opportunities. Be sure to check out my website, tashaeizinger.com. Let's dive into today's episode and start turning your dreams into reality. All right, today we are here with Dr. Lisa Riegel. I'm super excited. She's actually going to be a repeat guest, which makes me even more excited to have today's conversation because we're kind of just warming up to the other one that we'll have as well. For everybody to understand who is with us today, Dr. Lisa Riegel has spent over 2 decades helping schools, leaders, parents, and organizations align brain science with human systems. She started as an educator, of course, wanting to help children reach their potential, and it's evolved into this today. She has authored 5 books, 2 of which we're going to talk about today, and is in peer-reviewed journals. And I'm just so excited about the wealth of information and experience that you have on top of all the research you've done. So thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So how did you go from being a classroom teacher to saying, I'm going to go and be a neuroscientist?
Well, I started out, I was a teacher for 9 years, and I had a really great administrator the first couple of years, and then she left and I got a series of really ineffective leaders. So that started me really on the whole leadership pathway to be thinking about how do you lead people. Then I ended up having the opportunity to be a leader, and so I was an administrator at a career center for a couple of years. Unfortunately, had another ineffective leader. Then I had the opportunity to study leadership at Ohio State. So I went there for my doctoral work. And I was really more interested in the human side versus the policy and org theory. And I felt like that was a real gap that we prepare our leaders, even in MBA programs, we prepare them to be executives, but not to necessarily be leaders. And so how do we teach the human side of leadership? And so that really got me interested. And it also, I always worked with at-risk kids in the classroom. So it was about how do I get these kids excited? How do I get them to feel confident and secure in themselves? So I kind of had that experience of the kid piece, and then I had the adult piece. And so I just started really digging into the social science stuff around motivation and engagement and learning. And then I thought, well, real change starts in the brain. So I probably should know how that works too. And then the whole science of reading movement kind of swept the nation. And I was like, so we're finally aligning the way we teach reading with the way the brain learns to read. Isn't that amazing that we're finally here? And yeah, but wow. And then I started thinking, well, gee, behavior's in the brain too. So let's study behavior and motivation and engagement and relationships through the lens of the brain versus through the lens of character or morality or choice.
So it's just like a little domino, right? This domino hit on this domino.
Yeah, if there's anything I can say about my life is that it was not a straight path. I have zigged and zagged all over the place, but I'm generally a pretty curious person. And so everywhere I've ended up is exactly where I needed to be in that moment. So it's been interesting.
And isn't it so invigorating to be in a place in your life now where you can add so much value because it's an accumulation of all this learning and experience and being curious. I also love people like you who say, there's this problem. And instead of whining and complaining about it, why don't I just go do something about it?
Yeah.
We need more people like you. We need more people thinking that way.
That's one thing that I do bring to the table with the clients that I work with is that because I was a teacher for so long and I was an academic, I worked at Ohio State and I was a researcher there in some projects, but I didn't become a researcher where I became disconnected from the classroom. So I really understand what it's like to be a teacher. And I spend a lot of my time in classrooms coaching teachers and then in offices and meetings coaching leaders and leadership teams. And then I also bring a perspective as a parent. Both my children, I'm the only one in my house without ADHD. So I was navigating, twice exceptional kids and special education and all of that kind of stuff. And my son was a very hard kid to teach. He was, God love him, he's doing great now. But when he was little, he was hyper and he would roll around and he needed to move, and school was not set up for him. So I actually even pulled him out and homeschooled him for a year. And so I've had kind of multiple different experiences that I bring to the table. And generally, like my book that we're going to talk about today is called Aspirations to Operations. I feel like a lot of people live in the aspirations phase. It's like, oh, I wish we could do something about this. We can, and we just have to operationalize it. We can't just think about concepts. We have to have action. And so that's what I always try to bring to the table is just, why are we doing this? Like, here's the knowledge you need, but here's the actual what it looks like when you do it. And so I don't leave people hanging when they're like, I'd like to do something, but I don't know where to start.
Where do people start? I mean, obviously get your book.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yeah, so I would say, I mean, the first thing, the first way to get started is to understand the why. So there is a little bit of learning, right? So it's understanding how the brain creates perceptions, how the brain operates, and really the biology of behavior. So I talk about behavior as the intersection of our biology and our context. So as a parent or as an educator or as a leader in any kind of organization, if I look at people's behavior around me through the lens of this is a biologic reaction, there's a lot of thinking going on. 80% of the thinking in our brain is unconscious. It's below our nose. So there's a whole lot of work being done that directs how we behave, react, respond, feel, that we don't have any ability to weigh in on until it's too late, until it's already, they've already created what our reaction should be. So understanding that biology can help us have a little more empathy and understanding, and it can also help us reframe the problem. And so we actually come up with solutions that work. I think I see in schools a lot of times, you've got I call them the complicated order. You've got the kid that just is not going to fit into the system the way that we have the system made. And we try all kinds of things that don't work because we make the assumption that this kid knows how to behave and is choosing not to. This is a character or a morality problem. It's a decision. And the reality is when we understand the biology, we understand that that's not always accurate. And then the other piece is the context. And ultimately, we shape the context. And we have kids that have a lot of negative worldviews, negative sense of self. There's a lot of negativity going on inside their brain. And again, it's not just thoughts. That gets kind of hardwired into the structures of your brain. And so, like I always say, the solution to pollution is dilution, right? So if we've got polluted brains that are negative, it impacts the way we perceive reality. So the antidote to that is positivity. And ultimately, we have control over setting up that context so people can be happy and healthy and successful.
So is this neuroplasticity then? Like you're kind of like rewiring people's brains, right?
Yes, some of it is rewiring. So there's two things. One is that, so when you are creating a perception, your brain, that I always say the brain's like a giant company. And so we think the brain is us, but in reality, again, 80% of the brain, we're not actively engaged in what's going on in there. So we have a data department, and the data department is in our thalamus, which is in that limbic system, doesn't know time, can't tell a story, right? Okay. So the thalamus, I call my data manager Harold. So Harold is my data manager. His job is to take in all the information from the environment and say, okay, this is like that, right? Because if every new experience was novel, our brain would blow up. I mean, we have to have patterns and things where we're like, okay, now we know what we're looking at.
And that's really, like, our brain is a master at finding patterns.
Absolutely. Yes.
It's to help us survive, correct? So it's looking for patterns to keep us safe.
Yep.
Which was great a long time ago when there were wild animals around us. Yes. Now it's trying to keep us safe in areas where it's like, no, we actually are safe. Is that accurate? Okay.
100%. Yes. Our brain, unfortunately, is an amazing machine for how we lived thousands of years ago. In today's world, it still has the same mechanisms, and it's formed, all that part in our limbic brain is to keep us alive. to keep us safe. And so when we think of behavior as, well, I'm making these decisions about how I want to respond in situations, you are, but your brain is feeding you a whole lot of information to scare you before you get there. Because at the end of the day, the fear keeps you alive. And so it's making these associations between what's going on now and what's gone on in the past. And then our body responds in the exact same way, regardless of the fact that this is not that. So if you, for example, had a hypercritical parent who was always putting you down, you might view feedback as scary or dangerous or unsafe. So if somebody comes at you and says, you really need to work on this, or gives you some constructive feedback, before the thinking part of your brain gets a chance to even hear that, Harold is writing up a report that says, this is bad, this is bad. Last time we had this happen, we were completely anxious. And it's going to send then a note to your amygdala, who's your security monitor. I call him Bob. And Bob is going to hit the panic button, because all of that is done before our president of our brain gets to weigh in. So I see a lot of times in schools that, we punish a stress regulation problem. So we're giving a punishment to a kid and I am not somebody who's not a consequence driven. You ask my kids, they're 24 and 20. I had the mom stare, and they knew they were in more trouble when they got home if they were acting out.
Right. I don't get that vibe from you. Yeah, you give off the vibe that you want to be compassionate and empathetic. There's also consequences in the world.
Yes.
You have to have consequences sometimes. So yeah.
Absolutely. But I think
what you're saying.
Yeah, if we have the knowledge to understand that brain system and how it's working, then now all of a sudden I can look at a kid and be like, this doesn't have anything to do with right now. This kid is not choosing this behavior. This kid is not in control. And that's different. Kids make dumb decisions. We all make dumb decisions when we are 100% in control. And if that's the situation, then a straight up punishment oftentimes will stop the behavior from happening again. But when you've got kids who are not emotionally resilient, who are in chronic stress, their stress system gets broken. And Harold and Bob essentially take over. And when they take over and say you're not safe, Bob sends a message to the president of your brain, which is where you, the person resides, and says, hey, we're in danger, fire alarm, go get lunch, go grab a cup of coffee, get out of the building. We'll call you when we're safe. And so when I look around in schools, because I get called in a lot for observing some of the more complicated orders that they've tried stuff with. And when I look around in schools, a lot of times what I see is that the Bob and Harold of the kid is arguing with the Bob and Harold of the teacher. And neither of them are actually who they are. And this is why sometimes when you calm down, you're like, why did I say that? I don't even believe that. Why did I say that? And it's because you didn't. You were out at Panera having a cup of coffee, and Bob and Harold were running the show, trying to get you to safety.
So I can just blame Bob and Harold now.
Well, you can. The problem is that you still pay the consequences for their actions. So one of the things I always say is if you understand that brain science, and I think a lot of it starts with being in control ourselves. So, my big goal for humanity is self-awareness, self-regulation, and self-control. And you can't have self-control if you don't have the first two. So understand how your brain works, understand how to calm that body down. We have the other part that's involved in it is our vagal nerve, the vagus nerve.
Yeah.
Down our neck, around our heart. And it's kind of our systems manager. So it's always checking, is my heart beating okay? My stomach emptying. It's making sure the systems are running. But it also is checking where is your body in space. And this is called proprioceptive input. And what that is, if you're standing on the edge of a cliff, Harold needs to know that, because then he needs to tell Bob, hey, give her a little stress chemical. She might want to step away. She's walking right toward danger, right? So that vagus nerve is always giving information about where our body is. And the way that this is another example of where we are not living the way our body was intended, we don't move. And proprioceptive input is built by rolling down hills and hanging upside down and doing somersaults and moving your body through space and practicing the ability to know where all the pieces and parts are when you're not sitting or standing. And our kids don't play outside like that anymore. We don't do that. And, we a lot of people don't work out or play sports with hand-eye coordination where you've got to pay attention to that. And so our vagus nerve is always agitated, always sending messages to Harold of hey, I'm not 100% sure where we are. And so we're already elevated in our stress levels.
So I heard this thing, I don't know if you know, but I heard that in the wild, let's say a deer is being chased, right? So obviously the cortisol's high, it's fight or flight, it's running away. Let's say it gets to safety. One of the first things it will do is start shaking. And it's like shaking to get out like the stress and then calm, like it doesn't have PTSD, right? And
Yeah.
so is that something that, like, let's say somebody does feel stressed. I've heard like maybe humming to get the vagal nerve activated, movement, like you're saying. Is that actually a thing or
Yep,
not?
100%. Yep. So the Vega, and in fact, it's funny you mentioned humming because for whatever reason, I hum when I cook. And I'm humming just noise. It's not even always a song. So my husband always knows when I'm cooking because I'm just absent-mindedly humming. And then I started to learn about the brain and all these things. And I was like, I don't even know if I like cooking. I think it's just I'm so relaxed when I'm cooking because I'm humming and I'm massaging that vagal nerve. And there's another activity you can do super easy. And I highly recommend this for everyone on the planet is use your phone, set your phone for 30 minutes when you first start doing this. Every 30 minutes, have a little beeper go off or a little alarm.
Okay.
Take 2 or 3 deep breaths and remember, when in doubt, blow out. Blowing out longer than sucking in is the relaxation, right? So take a couple deep breaths, like you're blowing through a straw, and then take your wrists and your ankles and twist them. And then, you could kind of move your neck back and forth, just stretch your neck a little bit. Do that for maybe 15 seconds or so. And then when you put your feet on the ground, what you'll notice is where your feet are. You feel your feet. And so sending that message to the vagus nerve saying, hey, there's our feet, we're good. So, and you roll your wrist, the nerve will be able to map your whole body based on the furthest extremity that you're paying attention to. So if you are like squeezing your fingertips together so that you're noticing where they are, your nerve will be able to map all the rest of your arm and shoulders and body. And so then it knows where you are. So 30 minutes, you do that, take a couple breaths, do a little vagal nerve, maybe rub your neck, maybe stretch your neck, and then go back to work. And then a half hour later, it goes off, you do it again. And what happens is your body starts to get in a habit that every 30 minutes it relaxes on its own.
And why 30 minutes? Why is that important? Not like 90 minutes. Why 30?
You could do it 90 minutes. I think it's just to get some of that frequency dose in there. But fit it in whatever works in your day. The point is that you want to have your body regulate, the baseline of your body to remain calm. And that will help you because then you have executive functioning, which is what the executive of your brain, it's their job duties. And if your body's calm, the chance of keeping that person in your brain when stressors come at you is higher than if you're already elevated. And then Harold and Bob get a stressor in the environment and they say, okay, this is enough. Now I don't even know where I am. And now we have this stress. So, get out of here and go be safe and we'll take care of it.
Right. That's interesting. And such a simple thing for us to do.
So simple. And that's so many, these things are so simple. And so when I talk to business leaders, I talk to education, teachers, parents. If your focus is on the human system, and you don't have to have a dissertation on brain science, just a simple understanding of what's going on in there that you can like I think I summarized it in about 40 pages in my book with diagrams. So, not hard. So you learn a little bit about it, you do a little of these relaxation techniques, and now you have some self-control where the goal is that you are deciding how you want to proceed as opposed to letting Harold and Bob decide.
Yeah, I like to kind of tell myself like, hey, I'm the boss, not this other stuff. I'm the boss.
Yeah. Well, and I can give you a solid example. So when I was little, my parents were divorced. And so my dad would come and pick me up for his nights, and he was always late, always, always, always late. And, already divorce is disruptive and, some negative emotions in my body from that. I spent a huge chunk of my life sitting on the front step waiting for him. So my little 8-year-old
to hug little Lisa.
I know, me too, right?
And so heartbreaking.
Yeah. And my body and Harold, the association that was made was time is related to love or worth or respect or, all those things. Well, all the way into my 20s and 30s, like if my husband was running late or if I was running late, my body would be, I would have anxiety, I would be angry, and it didn't matter what I was thinking. Because I could tell myself, well, this is dumb, I'm fine. But then the thoughts come, right? And
Yeah.
so I had to, once I understood that, I was able to say, okay, hold on, I'm going to proactively tell Harold, don't even make that association. Because that's the other thing we see for kids is we see that they have a lot of inappropriate or faulty associations about what is dangerous in their environment. And it's a reaction to the context we live in. You look at all the negativity in the media and social media. Our kids are growing up with a worldview that the world is mean, the world is chaotic, the world is unpredictable, the world is going to end, people are mean, all of those kinds of things. So they have a lot of that negativity in their brain. So once I understood that association with time, two things. One, I was able to say, okay, this is not that. So before I started to get angry, if I looked and I was like, there's no way we're going to get there on time, before I started to ratchet up, I'd be like, Harold, this is not that. We are fine. It's an open house. We don't have to be there at the beginning, And then the second thing is I leave early. If I'm working with somebody, and I always laugh with my different clients, because I'm like, if I'm not here 10 to 15 minutes early, I'm in like a ditch somewhere, because I'm always early. And it's just because then I don't have to even worry about it. And so I've been able to put that in place. And so I think by teaching yourself that, and also teaching kids how their brain works and giving them some of these tools through the way that we set up our routines in our classrooms or in our home, how we set up certain routines can make all the difference in the world for helping them feel that sense of control. And anxiety is essentially the product of not knowing. If I don't know to get anxious. So the more I feel in control, the less anxiety I have.
100%. Yeah. And I also heard you say something. It's another thing that I do is, let's say I do feel like a really strong emotional reaction to something, whatever it is. And I get curious, like, why did that bother me so much?
Yeah.
Where did that come from? And I get really curious. I think if we can get curious about ourselves and really ask those questions, and I'm not judgmental either. It's like, I just want to understand why that thing bothered me. And then once I connect those dots, then the next time it doesn't have to own me the same way.
Yes. And I think that's where, when you think about, if you understand the Harold and Bob situation, then there isn't shame or guilt. It's just for whatever reason, that part of my brain associated this in a negative way. I'm going to be the good leader, the good president of the company here, and I'm going to go in and investigate why they have this faulty process in place. So it takes away that guilt and shame that a lot of us feel. And I do an exercise with kids and adults. Just make a list of the things that upset you. Like, do you not like loud spaces? Do you not like crowded malls? Do you not like certain fabrics? Do you not like certain smells? Do you not like it when people say no to you? Do you not like it when, you feel like you've been misrepresented, or when somebody gives you feedback? Just make a list of those things and then ask yourself why, and try to uncover the underlying fear, because it's oftentimes not what is happening in the moment. It's the association that fear that Harold is associating. And so if you can uncover what the underlying fear is, so like with my example with time, it's not time, it's a fear of being unloved, or a fear of, a fear of not being important to somebody that I love, kind of thing. And so once I understood that fear, then you start to see that fear rear its ugly head in all kinds of different places. And then you can, to your point, once you understand that's your fear, you can start to take a little more control and be like, no, Harold, you are starting to do some faulty thinking here. So let's knock it off.
Yeah, that's so funny, because I talk to my amygdala sometimes. I'm like, listen, you need to settle down, amygdala.
Yeah.
We are fine.
Yeah, we need to simmer down here, buddy. Yep.
That is so funny. Oh my goodness. So one of the things I'm thinking is, there's probably somebody listening that's like, okay, Dr. Riegel, this is great for you. I love this for you. This is too deep of thinking. This is just who I am, and this is just how it is. What would you say to that type of person?
I would say to them that if that is your belief in yourself, then you're choosing that the current filters and the current systems in your brain are working the way that you want them to. So if you feel that way, then you should be happy, healthy, and successful. If you feel like that's just who I am and you're not happy, healthy, or successful, then the good news is you have a lot of power to change it. And
Oh,
and this
yes.
is also when you started talking about neuroplasticity, there are 7 conditions that need to happen in order for us to build new neural connections. So when you think of like our brain is like a giant highway, and when we're born, it's just a field of grass. And through repeated traveling from one place to another, we start to wear down those paths. It's like if you've ever been at a park or at a college campus and there's like a dirt path and you're like, man, they should have put a sidewalk there because the kids are all using it, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of how our brain is. It's like repetition over time. And just like those paths get easier to traverse as they get packed down and eventually paved, it's the same thing in our brain. As we do it more and more, it becomes automatic. We don't have to think so hard, and it doesn't take as much energy. So when we're trying to build a new habit, there's 7 things that need to happen. And the first one is we have to know where to go instead. And that's where, like what I was saying earlier, we assume people know the right behavior to do and are choosing not to do it. Let's say you and I were going to we're like, okay, we're going to get healthy. So you and I are roommates. We're like, we are going to food prep. We're going to eat better. We're going to stop doing the happy hours at the Cheesecake Factory. We're going to instead go to Golden Corral. Like we'd be like, what? That's not a better choice, right? So we have to know where to go. We have to know to say, okay, we're actually going to go to the vegetable restaurant, which was funny. Somebody the other day, I was using this and they pointed out to me, so you can name the Cheesecake Factory, but you can't even name a single vegetable restaurant. I was like, fair enough. So
That is so funny. So
Yeah.
here's my question then. What about somebody who's like, listen, it's just common sense. They should just know.
Well, they should. A lot of things should, but they don't,
Yeah.
So that's where, because I hear that in schools a lot, well, they should know better. Yeah, but they don't. So we can either insert new behavior or we can continue to punish them for stuff they don't know.
We can
So
argue about something that's not going to change anything.
no, it's not going to change anything. So the first step is you got to know where to go. And the second step is you have to be self-aware enough to drive past the comfortable exit to the new pathway. And so, that gets into, it's hard, and that gets into goal setting and support. Put a sticky note. You're a good eater. You're going to do this today. Share your goals with friends. Check in with yourself every day. Give yourself little prizes. You have to have a way to say, I am about to go through and make this mistake and go down the path I don't want. And this is where understanding Harold and Bob, if you're trying to change an emotional pathway in your brain, understanding what that underlying fear is can help you with the self-awareness piece. The third thing you need to have the will to be uncomfortable. Our brain is developed to know, right? It likes patterns. It wants certainty. And this is why we can get into negative behavioral patterns. We know they're negative. We know it's bad when I feel stressed that I drink 6 beers. We know it's not a good idea, right? But we do it anyways because it's comfortable. And for me to stop and instead have a protein shake is not comfortable and it's new. So, to the food example, we're going to have to put stuff in our mouth we've never put in our mouth before. And that will stress our brain out and it will elevate our stress system, which is why it's so important to have a partner or have somebody supporting you saying, you're going to do this. You're going to be okay. It's fine. We can do this. So that's the third one. The fourth is we have to have energy because it takes a lot of energy. Think about paving a road, right? Well, how do we get energy? We get it through positivity, through recognition, through those dopamine hits. And, think about if you've ever been on a diet and you've lost 15 pounds and not one person says, hey, have you lost weight or you look good? You're not getting the reinforcement. And what I see a lot of times in schools is that we are actually focused on when they screw up as opposed to focused on when they tried. And
how
so
many positives does it take? Because I've heard different numbers. Like, let's say a kid or an adult hears like one negative thing. Doesn't it take like 10 or 20, 40? I've heard so many numbers of positives to counteract it.
Yeah, I've heard anywhere from 7 to 20. And I think it partially depends on your own self-image.
True.
If the threat was reinforcing one of those biases in your brain, then you might be taking more. But yeah, so you've got to have know where to go instead. You've got to have knowledge, you've got to have self-awareness, you've got to have energy. You've also got to have persistence, right? You got to pave over and over again. And here's the big one is you have to have tenacity to forgive yourself, because you're going to go the wrong way, right? You're going to be tired and you're going to be like, ugh, I don't want to go home and food prep. I'll just run through the drive-through tonight, right? This is where people mess up. And this is why New Year's resolutions don't last past like 2 weeks, is because you and I then would say, well, we fell off the wagon, we're going to get back on. It was good. The food was great. I feel gross now because I ate a bunch of grease, but that's okay. And we're going to get back on it. Or we're going to say, Tasha, we were never meant to be healthy eaters. So like, let's get back on what we know about ourselves, right? To the
I
point of
always mess up. I always fail. I always like that. I hear a lot from people too, is it
yeah.
just reinforces that negative belief of yourself.
Exactly. And that's it. Even the thing you just said about, yeah, Lisa, this is good for you, but what about other? I mean, that's exactly that tenacity
Yes.
to be able to say, no, I have a goal and I can do this and I deserve it. And then you have to have the support. And, sometimes extrinsic rewards can help get you started. So like, say you want to go work out and you're like, okay, I'm going to be healthy. I'm going to walk or play a sport or go to the gym or whatever. If you say, I'm going to do that 3 times a week, and if I do it 3 times a week, I'm going to buy myself a pair of shoes or workout pants or something, some prize. That works really well when you're first getting started. So for example, it might be a Friday and I'm like, man, I'm tired. I really don't want to do the gym. But if I go, I can buy the shoes this weekend. And I told myself I was going to go 3 times. That might be enough to get me to go. Once I go to the gym all the time and it becomes part of my life, it actually demotivates me. I'm tired on a Friday and I'll be like, ugh, I don't want to go. And you know what? I have enough shoes. I don't need shoes. I'll go next week. So giving yourself extrinsic prizes and rewards as you're starting a new behavior, but then tapering that off and building a support system around you to give the dopamine hits and the positivity. And this is something else I see that they do really, really wrong in schools, is the positive behavior intervention that a lot of schools do with points and tokens and tickets. It's a very, very time-consuming, expensive system that does not have the intended impact because it doesn't have the 7 conditions. It tries to boil the ocean. You have everything you do here is wrong, and so you have to now do everything right, as opposed to focused areas, and it lacks those 7 conditions. So I work with schools.
So glad to hear you say that, because I don't like those kinds of reward systems.
Right.
Because I also think a lot of times the kids who consistently do the right thing, they're consistently trying to behave almost perfectly, that they don't get the stars and the tokens and recognition because it's just an expectation. And then the kids who don't consistently do that, and then they miraculously do it one time right in front of the teacher to make sure the teacher sees them and they plan it. Then they get the star. And there's so many layers to that I don't like about those systems. So
there are so many things wrong with the way that we do that. So, and the thing is, it's sad because it's built on good brain science. But again, it goes back to, because we didn't understand the why, then it's been implemented in a way that doesn't work, and it makes people exhausted.
And the kids who behave well then sometimes say things like, well, I thought I was a good kid and I guess I'm not, because
what do I get for this? It turns the culture into a transactional culture, and that's not what you want either.
No. So what is the right system?
So what I always recommend is, well, I start with teachers should be setting their classrooms up so that all kids belong and feel a sense of belonging. And so right now, most of what I see in classrooms is about control and compliance. I'm the king or queen, you're my subjects, do what you're told, sit down, do it the way I tell you, right? So what we want to try to do is shift that away from control and compliance to, we are a learning community, right? So our job in this space is to learn. That's our mission. We're going to have fun and get off track sometimes, but at the end of the day, that's our job. You have a right to choose not to learn. If you have a bad day, you can put your head down, you can choose. If you choose that all the time, I'm going to talk to you, because the point of coming is learning, right? You never have the right to take that away from another person. And so if you're doing things that are taking away the opportunity for somebody else to learn, then we have a problem. So now all of a sudden, it's not a power struggle between me and a student. It's you have a responsibility to the community and I'm here to make sure that the community is functioning. So it's a different vibe. Then you say, okay, so what's a good learner and what's a good community member? And you list actual things like, a good community member lets people finish their thought before they interrupt, or a good community member respects that everybody doesn't want to be touched all the time, that maybe respects personal space or things like that. So you're getting to it goes back to those 7 conditions. Here's where to go instead, right? These are the things that you want to see. Then you have everybody pick. You say everybody's not good at everything. So you guys pick one thing that you want to work on, one of these behaviors that you want to work on. And if you have a complicated order in your classroom, you can say, and you, my friend, are going to work on this because this is the one that's causing you the most trouble, right? So you can kind of assign it if you have to. So then you group them and you say, okay, all of you guys are kind of working on like organization, classroom learning type stuff. You guys are working on kindness or using kind words, or you guys are working on impulse control. So kind of group them. Then every day throughout the day, if you're elementary, you can do it a couple times a day. If you're where the kids are switching classes, it can be the last 30 seconds of each class. Okay, pull out your goal sheet, what you're working on. Give yourself a star if you think you have successfully taken the new behavior, and write down. So you put a star and you jot down what you did. And then the teacher can do a real quick circulation and be like, you know what, I noticed that in you too, and give them a star. So you're getting self, you're getting teacher, and then maybe once a week you put them in teams with the other kids that are working on it and say, how are you doing? How are you doing it? And like I had a group of high school kids, and the kid always forgot stuff at home. And he's like, I forget my homework. I forget all these things. So he had tried some different things. And finally he put a sticky note on his steering wheel. And he had tried having lists and things, but it didn't work. But he's like, it worked because I get in my car to come to school and there's the sticky note. So the last thing I see before I leave my house, and then I'm like, oh, I forgot that, and run in. And the other kid sitting there was like, that is genius. I'm going to do that. So now they're like empathizing with each other, they're learning together. And then you can, every couple of weeks, you can be like, hey, who's ready to change? Who's getting stars all the way, that now you feel like this has become a habit. Are you ready to change to a different goal? So you always have kids working on goals, but they're personally set, and it's one goal at a time. If I came and told you you had 12 new things you need to do every day,
Done. No.
Not going to happen. And so, so that's kind of how I restructure the PBIS. And then they get points based on, how I assess myself, because let's face it, if you're a teacher and you had a fight with your kid in the morning, you're in a bad mood, nobody's getting dojo points that day or whatever you use, right? Because you're just in a bad mood. So this kind of creates that really subjective system and makes it more objective and self-report, and it gives that sense of dopamine and pride, and it gives the student something to go home with. And every single student is getting regular hits of dopamine all day as they're assessing themselves and having others assess them. And we
so great for many reasons. One thing I love about what you're saying is shame and guilt comes from I am bad.
Yep.
And this is getting away from I am bad or I am good. It is, where can I improve for my community, and where am I doing well for my community?
And for my community, not your, and I always say to kids, I'm like, you're not the main character in every scene. Sometimes you're a supporting character, and that blows their mind. It's like, you're part of a community. Sometimes you are a supporter.
Listen, Madam Researcher, you're probably wrong. That's probably what they're thinking. Like, no.
Right.
And then the other thing that I'm thinking is, so many teachers, they're thinking, I don't have time. What this is doing, if they, especially that first 9 weeks, hit this really hard and create this as a system within their classroom, it is going to give them so much more teaching and learning time for the rest of the school year, because kids are self-regulating, they're self-evaluating, they're becoming much more self-aware. It's becoming that community.
Yes.
Is that right? Like, it's freeing up so much more class time because you're not dealing with all these behavior issues, which takes up so much class time.
Right. The other thing that I suggest to teachers, and if there's one thing to try, and I'm telling you what, this works 100% of the time. You have to teach the kids to do it, but once you teach them, it's perfect. And it's called learning sprints. So if you think about have you ever gone to like the gym and you get on a treadmill, you're like, okay, I'm going to run for a half hour or something. And you're running and running and you look down and it's like 7 minutes have gone by and you're like, I'm never going to make it. Right. Kids' school day is 8 hours of the never ending treadmill. So learning sprints, it's like interval training. It breaks it up. So within a class, when kids come in, you might say, okay, today in our 50-minute class or whatever, we're going to do 3 learning sprints. We've got a 10-minute, we've got a 17-minute, and we've got a 11-minute, whatever. They don't have to be the same length of time. You go through the expectations. During this first learning sprint, I'm going to be doing some talking at you. So I need your ears open, mouths shut, get your notes out. This is what we're going to do. And then you're going to have some time to do group work, whatever. So you're setting expectations. Put the timer up on the board. So either get like a digital timer for the wall, or you can use Google timers or things like that. Put them up so that they are visible. And that's really important. Now the kids know what they're supposed to do and they can focus for that small chunk of time. When the timer goes off, no matter what you're doing, if I'm in the middle of a sentence, I'll be like, oh, ran out of time. We'll pick it up right after our learning break. And you give them 2-minute break, 3-minute break. And so they're doing forced focus. They're learning to shift their focus and take a brain break. And you can put vagal nerve exercises in there. You can say, just talk to your neighbor. You can remember the solution to pollution is dilution. So you can turn to people at your table and talk about one good thing that happened today. What's one thing that people don't know about you that you think is pretty cool? All kinds of things you can ask. Okay, now it's time for a learning sprint. This one's an 8-minute one. We're going to do this. You can mix them, back and forth depending on what you're doing. But keep in mind that the brain, like unless we're actually actively engaged in a conversation or an activity, 10 minutes is about all we've got to sit and listen until we start to wander, right? So I did this with a teacher who teaches a computer-based curriculum. The productivity in her students within 3 weeks improved by 30%.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's incredible. So because what it does is it teaches kids there's a time to focus. It teaches them, how long is 10 minutes? What can I accomplish in 10 minutes if I put my mind to it? And then it's also teaching them to go back and forth. And I'll hear teachers say, oh, I'm never going to get them back if I do that. And I give them a break. And I'm like, if you don't give them a break, you don't have them to begin with. You're dealing with talking. How many times do you have to repeat your instructions? If you're repeating yourself multiple times, you're already on the losing end of this. And so it helps just that focus. And even kindergartners, like I had a kindergarten teacher that did it. And she's like, after like 3 days, the kids, she'd say, okay, learning sprint. And they'd all get like excited and sit in their seats. And they would talk to each other like, look how much you got done in 10 minutes. Look how much you got done. All this fodder to celebrate and make it a positive classroom place. So if you can do the learning community and the individual goal setting and break your class into learning sprints, you will see a huge difference. And that's just scratching the surface of the impact that you can make on kids' brains.
Well, and also like for us, like as adults, I'm like, we can do some of this stuff too, because it's like the same brain.
Yeah.
It functions very similarly. Am I right?
Yeah. Our brains are the same. They're just, they just have more stuff inside of them as we get older. But yeah, it's the same. Yeah, we hope that they get more sophisticated, but yeah.
So yeah, I tease that grown-ups are just a bunch of kids walking around in grown-up bodies, really. Like,
yeah. Well, and I was at a school the other day and we were talking, this is a high school for at-risk kids, and the teachers there were like, these kids don't know how to have fun. Like it's really sad. And, and I started really thinking about that. And I was like, kids don't know how to play. They're either in a structured environment in a game with rules, or they're playing a video game that's very scripted, telling them where to go. They don't know how to just have unstructured time to play. And so, even these brain breaks, just giving them 2 minutes or 3 minutes, that's not too scary to have unstructured time, and just let them do whatever they want. Tell them, just draw. Or even better, creative thinking requires a quiet mind. So you say, okay, for this learning break, we're going to put some music on, put your head down, and I want you to visualize a story in your head. And then music for 45 seconds. And then say, turn to your partner. What'd you see? Who was the main character? Was it an animal or a person? Just starting to like give them a minute to have some of that unstructured brain space.
Yeah. So just to clear it up that, common sense isn't always so common. When you said do whatever you want, you're not saying let them run around and scream and climb on desks. That's
No,
not what you're
no,
saying.
no. No, I'm saying you might have, like, I've had teachers that have set up stations. I
Yeah.
have a Play-Doh station. You can go over and just do some tactile stuff.
Yes. So there's
Um,
some freedom in choice, but
yeah,
as the adult in the room,
yeah,
you create the choices.
yes. Well, and the thing too with older students is that giving people some unstructured time just to say, you guys have a break, do it, 2 minutes, talk to your friend, go to the bathroom if you need to go to the bathroom. Because the other thing I see in classrooms is, and you can see it like clockwork, the teacher starts something about 10 to 15 minutes in, the kids start with the, can I go to the bathroom? Can I go to the bathroom? They don't have to go to the bathroom. They
No.
need to move. They need a break, right? So it also is nice because these little sprints, they know the break is coming. And if I'm coming to the end of my attention span, I can look up and be like, okay, I've got like 90 seconds. I can do this for 90 more seconds. So you reduce the disruptions and the power struggles and all of that. So it helps behaviorally and it helps
Yeah.
academically.
But I think this is so important too, because sometimes I feel like we put such high expectations behaviorally, sometimes not enough academically, but that's another conversation.
Yeah.
But behaviorally, we put such high expectations on kids that we don't do as adults.
Nope. Right.
Like if you tell me I have to sit there and listen to a lecture about something that I'm like kind of confused on because it's new and I don't understand it, and I'm supposed to stay super focused the entire time and just sit there and listen.
Yep.
Not get out my phone and not scroll and not distract myself.
Yep.
I'm not doing that.
Nope.
But we ask and demand kids
Yep.
to do it. So I like how you're helping people understand, like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
how this works.
Yeah. Well,
And you're getting better results too,
yeah,
in so many ways.
absolutely. It's like when you have professional development days and they put you in teams to get something done. Here's a challenge question. What percentage of the time does your team actually produce what it needs to do, unless it has to be turned in, right? So we complain kids won't do anything without grades or points, but we're the same way.
Yeah.
And so unless it's relevant to you or unless it's forced upon you. So the key is, how do we make it relevant to the kids so that they want to engage in those things? And that sense of accomplishment, I think there's also a fallacy that everything in school has to be mind-blowing. Some things are boring. You just have to learn them. But the learning sprints can serve as a way to give you some of that positive dopamine, because look at what I got accomplished. And then, it can be like, okay, you guys have, and I do, if you've got dry material, short sprints, we're doing 5 minutes. Let's see how many can you get through, go, and then they're focused, and then you can celebrate productivity and completion as opposed to celebrating how much the content's amazing to you.
Right. And then I feel like teachers feel like they have to be performers and entertaining and all of that. It kind of gets teachers back to doing what they really wanted to do, which is educate and teach.
Right.
So you're not asking anybody to learn this newfangled crazy curriculum. These are simple things with maximum reward. So please tell me that this stuff is like all in your books, right?
It is. So the book for teachers who are interested in this, the book is called NeuroWell. It goes through, the first section kind of explains like all those filters in your brain, the biology and context, what's the contextual factors that have truly changed our brain. And it's technology, it's media, it's the way the medical industry works, it's teenage sports, it's parenting, it's all kinds of things. So it kind of goes through how those things are breaking our brains. Then it goes into the actual brain and how the brain functions, and kind of the Harold and Bob story, but in a little more detail. Then it goes through how to actually create this NeuroWell culture within your classroom. And then how do we influence change in the home to make the home a more positive place? So NeuroWell kind of gives you the what we should be doing. And then aspirations to operations is really that it's an 8C framework. So it goes through, culture, how do we plan for change? How do we engage people? How do we sustain it? So it's a leader's guide to saying, if we want to really change this, turn the boat, how do I do it? And how do I engage people using the brain science of the adults in the system?
So they need both books. That's the moral of the story. You need both books.
That would be great.
If you don't want to ban yourself, go to your principal and ask for PD money for the school to get both books, right?
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I've done with some schools is that teachers that want CEU credit, like I'll do a book study. So if they get, like 10 teachers or something that want to do it, we can meet 3 or 4 times and go through, or even more often than that. So we design like how many contact hours do you want? And then I can issue a certificate that, obviously the local PD committee has to approve, but we can do book studies. And I do book studies with leader teams as well to say, how do we actually move the system? Because we are truly, I think, in a phase right now with AI coming in. Education's going to have, it is the most disruptive change that we're going to have. And if we don't start to really pivot the boat fast, we are going to be obsolete.
Fast. It needs to be done fast. I
It
agree.
needs to be done fast. And to me, the whole purpose of education is shifting. It used to be content transmission, but we don't need that anymore. And career pathways, who knows what they are? The careers themselves don't know. And we have all these new jobs that are popping up. So those 2 purposes that we've kind of hung our hat on are sort of irrelevant. And we're seeing kids vote with their feet that, why am I coming to school, right? So I feel like we need to be really focused on how do we teach thinking? How do we teach self-regulation and self-control? And, and it's a nice segue into our next conversation, because we're going to talk about ADHD and executive function. To me, that is the ticket for the school of the future, is to teach thinking and social engagement and all of those skills that make us human.
Absolutely. We need people who know how to use their brain.
Yes.
They need
to. Yep.
And I want to backtrack. I want to say we need to change fast and effectively.
Yes.
Not just fast change.
Yeah.
And so how can people get in touch with you, Dr. Riegel, especially if they're wanting those credits? Like, how can people find you and all of that?
Yeah, so they can go to my website, and you probably put it in the show notes, but it's EP Institute or lisariegel.com. I have 2 different websites. Or they just find me on LinkedIn and connect with me and message me. And then my email and everything else is on LinkedIn. I don't hide it. So just reach out and, we can set up a call to talk about how I can support your schools. Or I do, even if there's school leaders here or teachers, I do one-on-one coaching as well. So I can do that as well.
Yeah, I feel so inspired by what you're sharing. I think it's really important that people at least consider it. Even try something in your classroom that you learned today, even in your own home. Try it, because I know it's going to work. You know it's going to work, but sometimes people have to see like it's going to work. And get in touch with Dr. Riegel for sure. So thank you so much for being here. I cannot wait for our next conversation as well.
Great. Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Diary of a Dreamer. I hope you found the stories and tips shared today to be a source of motivation and strength. Remember, every challenge you face is a chance to grow and move closer to your dreams. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with anyone who could use a boost of encouragement. Please check out my website, TashaEizinger.com.